So it appears you guys want my opinion on ReString sync. Well, this is the video where I give that to you. I'm going to put it into context with ReString 0 naturally. Got to compare to the OG. I actually have it in this racket. Some of you guys know what this is. I'm sure others are like, what could that possibly be? But it has ReString in the mains, 0. I have to specify now because ReString has 2 strings, and sync in the crosses. I've also gotten to know it in other rackets that aren't even in this video, like maybe the sets have broken by now. We also have it in this Pure Aero 98. In this case, it's actually Ether by Tourmaline in the mains with 18 gauge sync in the crosses. Yes, sync comes in 18 gauge, 17 and 18. ReString 0 comes in 17 and 16. We also have, got a lot of rackets here, don't I? Should have freed up a hand. Let's do that. It'll balance there just fine, right? Yeah, don't fall. Don't fall. But if it falls, it's just water, so it's all good. We also have a string I can't talk about in the mains. I'm sorry, that's just the life I'm living now. But we also have ReString sync in the crosses. So point is, let's get all the ReString rackets actually in one pile here, just so we're clear on the rackets that do and do not have it. This racket has nothing in it, actually. We'll see what we decide to put in here. I'm not gonna think about that right now, but let's get that all situated. You guys know what this is? This racket is Sinner's mold. I'll talk about this in another video. Shout outs to AC Tennis, by the way. Say hi for me. We might do a little video collab sometime soon. I've had quite a lot of time with this string. I was given the initial prototype quite some time ago, and I actually have a lot of really good things to say. The only knock I have on sync is that it doesn't offer quite as much snapback as 0. But I want to be very clear. It's a small enough difference that in a lot of rackets, actually, you might not even notice. Like literally, if you do this test where you pull it off to the side and see if the strings snap back, in some rackets it's going to until the strings actually break. So still, the snapback is among the best, but snapback isn't everything. For me, it's actually one of the most important things because without really good snapback, I'm not going to get good durability and I'm not going to get good spin. It's a really happy side effect that great snapback correlates with great durability because the strings don't eat into themselves as much when the friction is reduced that much. So performance, playability, durability, topspin, all those things just skyrocket when the snapback is there. So that's one of the reasons it's so important to me as a string breaker, as a topspin heavy player. So it's still up there. It's still worthy of being in a bed of strings that meet that caliber. But on some rackets, you might notice that it actually doesn't snap back quite as well. So let me show you an interesting example. This is a 98 Pure Aero, and this is a VS Pure Aero. Essentially the same racket. Now, why this one that's older and has been hit more, why does this one seem to snap back more, okay? It actually was quite a bit better until recently, but honestly, most of these are snapping right back in place. So basically 10 out of 10 snapback. And just so we're clear, in case you haven't seen my other content, ReString 0, Tourmaline Wasabi, those are the initial strings to really set the bar for snapback, as in nobody else came close. Nobody. And to this day, still nobody. There are a couple strings out there, but they're by Tourmaline, such as Ether. Anyway, I don't want to drag on that point too much. I think I've made it in a lot of my content, but I don't want you guys thinking that you can get that level of snapback from other strings because it really hasn't existed until these companies set the bar. Anyway, in this racket, we have Ether and sync, but there's way, way less snapback. Now, why would that be? This is interesting. Let's change the light color for the topic. Just because, what do you want, blue? Yeah, let's do blue. Okay, actually, I want green because blue doesn't contrast with the wall enough. All right, the reason that this racket is not snapping back and this one is because I'm using lighter gauges. Why would lighter gauges not snap back as well? You know, I asked myself the same thing and I think I have the answer. I believe the reasons people think that lighter gauges would snap back better are because the strings are thinner, less surface area, less friction, more snapback. Let's put it this way. Let's imagine a string that's about as thin as dental floss. Now, I don't have a gauge measurement as to how thick dental floss is, but it's very, very thin. Let's say that you weave a racket with dental floss. Let's say you do the crosses and mains with dental floss. Not recommending you do this, but if you were to do that, you would virtually have no zigzag pattern that you could really see because there's no thickness to the dental floss. So when the strings would interlace, they would kind of just be flat on top of each other, but the thicker the strings get, the more intense that interlacing pattern gets. In other words, there's sort of this peak and valley pattern, the intensity to which is determined partly by the thickness of the strings. And so if you have thicker strings, the peaks and valleys are going to be steeper. And I think that steepness actually helps to snap the strings back into place. It almost creates like a ramp in both directions where the mains have to sit in the center. The thinner the strings are, the less intense that peak and valley is. Therefore, the mains are less aggressively oriented to their center position. So I think that's why thinner gauges do not snap back into place as well. I know for a fact it's not because I'm using ether in the mains and sync in the crosses. I know for a fact that ether is one of, again, the best snapbacking strings. If I use Wasabi X in the crosses, this doesn't happen, which is surprising because Wasabi X isn't even that much thicker than sync, but the combination of using the 17 light gauge, which ether comes in with, 18 gauge sync, I think that makes a big enough difference, in addition to the slight dip in snapback that you will get from sync compared to Wasabi X. So for those asking how I feel about how it compares to Wasabi X, there's a little bit of an answer for you. So one takeaway from this video would be that if you want to maximize the snapback when using sync, I think you'd have to use 17 gauge. I don't know if you can expect the snapback that I stand by using the 18 gauge. I was actually really excited to see the 18 gauge string come out because I thought it would be a cool way to soften up a string bed, increase the amount of feel, and it actually is those things. I just didn't expect it to have the side effect of that much less snapback. I also want to say when it comes to 18 gauge strings, they play lighter. They have a lighter way of playing. Like they just give to the momentum of a ball on contact a little bit more. And I actually find that kind of annoying. I feel like it takes a little bit longer for the racket and the string bed actually to get through a really heavy ball. The 18 gauge strings are just kind of maybe a little bit too elastic and they don't hold tension as well. And on top of that, obviously not getting the snapback that I am accustomed to now. And at this point in time, I don't really feel like I need to soften up my string bed. I just thought it would be a nice benefit to appreciate. But for me, the cons outweigh the pros. But even if you're me, that could depend on the racket that you're using. If you're using a really dense string pattern, you know, a tightly spaced 18 by 20, and you're not a super spin heavy player that wants to maximize topspin and snapback, 18 gauge might be a really great route for you. So I'm not trying to talk anybody out of that. I'm just saying that if you're more like me than not, I think you're more likely to lean towards the thicker gauge as opposed to the thinner gauge. So just get 17s if you want to maximize snapback. But by all means, if you think you're the type of person that would appreciate 18s in the crosses or in a full bed, absolutely. Try it out. If you're hitting through the ball and you hit a little bit flatter, but you want a comfortable string with good touch and still really good durability, like, I don't know, think about it. But for my goals, my intentions, I'm gonna stick with the 17s. All right. Compared to ReString 0, I would say that this string, well, first of all, it's a round shape. ReString 0 is a hexagonal shape. We can get a little close up just so you can see that here. The gauge size is also slightly different. I gotta be honest with you guys, I think gauge sizes start to get a little bit subjective when you start changing the shape of the string. So ReString is a 1.23 millimeter 17 gauge, whereas Sync 17 is 1.25. Yes, that is correct. They actually have that data or information printed on the strings now, so that's a little small new change coming out from ReString. I still have some inventory of 0 that is actually unmarked on the string. Is there a difference in thickness? I don't really know. Because when it comes to shaped strings, I don't know if they measure from corner to corner or from side to side, or if they measure both and then kind of take the average of the two measurements. I have no idea. Does somebody know? I feel like gauge sizes are a little bit subjective when shape comes into play. Obviously, if you're measuring a round poly, there is no side, there is no corner. It is just the same diameter no matter what way you measure it. So yeah, anyway, that being said, that's a small difference on paper with the gauge sizes. In terms of playability, I would say in relationship to each other, 0 is the more powerful string. It is the more snapback friendly string. It has more bite. Stiffer, but also arguably a little bit more numb compared to Sync. I think that's why these strings work so well together in a hybrid. I love ReString 0. I really, really do. And I have since day one. But even since day one, I've always theorized that a round string in the crosses just makes a little bit more sense. Like, why do I need the shape? It's not really playing a role in biting the ball. As far as I'm concerned, the only reason for having a shape on a string is to assist in biting the ball. So the cross string really has no purpose in having a shape. So I feel like the purpose of a cross string is to bring in other characteristics such as comfort or feel or maybe power or less power, who knows? Could be anything. But you don't have to worry about a trade-off in that direction affecting bite because, again, the bite is irrelevant since it is the cross string. So that's my theory. That's how I think about it. That's how I've always thought about it. And so when ReString 0 came along, I was stoked. I was very, very happy to see the performance, but I was like, well, in a perfect world where I am asking too much, I would love to see a string with the same level of snapback, but round. And sometime after that, Wasabi X came into the picture, and ReString 0 crossed with Wasabi X was one of my favorite hybrids of all time, and honestly, still is. I need a little bit more time with sync to see if I can confidently say that's one of my favorite hybrids of all time. It just feels like premature to say something like that, but I can definitely say it might be a contender. In other words, sync lives up to the standard ReString 0 has set. And I think the color palette works well. You have kind of neon, electric, sky blue-ish color, lighter silver color. Anyway, the colors pair well together, but they also perform well together. ReString 0 really set itself apart in a lot of ways from the competition, namely with snapback, but also with their tension maintenance. I think ReString 0 is one of the best tension maintenance polys. So how amazing is that the snapback and the tension maintenance are actually among the best ever? I think that's great. So not an easy bar to meet, but the tension maintenance is great. And it offers something different. So when you pair the two together, you get a nice harmony of qualities. I guess I would also say that I'm more likely to use ReString 0 with sync in the crosses than I am to use ReString 0 in a full bed. I actually can't remember the last time I did use ReString 0 in a full bed. I'm not against it, but ever since Wasabi X came out, it was pretty much, that's my cross string when I'm using 0. And it was also my cross string when I was using strings like Wasabi, which I still do, Ether, which I still do. And yeah, I think that puts perspective on sync. Some people ask me, how does it compare to other strings, you know? And when they're asking me that, they're asking me, how does it compare to like big name brands, mainstream brands? So if I'm talking about Toraline and ReString and how any of their strings compare to the mainstream brands out there, I gotta be honest, at this point, those mainstream brands are just irrelevant to me. I am not interested. And the reason I'm not interested is because the performance differences for me, I felt like there's like 15 strings that are kind of at the top of my list, but they're all sort of interchangeable. And I wasn't really super satisfied with any of them. I was always wondering, why aren't these strings made to have better snapback? Because they would have better durability and better spin, right? I just imagine that. Like if that physical quality was possible to bring to these strings, they'd be better in these ways. And I was just like, I don't know why it doesn't exist. And so when I happened to try Toraline, because a friend of mine who isn't even that critical about strings or anything just said, oh, I'm trying Toraline or whatever, they're giving out samples or something. I was kind of like, okay, I'll just see what I think, I guess. Why not? And I did, and I was blown away, and it changed me. And I had never found that, despite having tried basically all the popular and even less popular spin-friendly polys out there. None of them wowed me. Pretty much all the polys that I liked until these strings were like, oh, this is basically giving me what RPM Blast gives me, but it's cheaper. It was never like, wow, that's way better than whatever. They were all just kind of interchangeably useful, but never mind-blowing. So to reel it back to the question of how does it compare to other mainstream strings, the best strings from the rest of the market are like here. My favorite strings from Toraline and ReString are like way up here. I don't even want. Now, I swear on everything. Some people think I'm shilling because I'm so into these strings. I'm not. You would have to pay me to put those strings in my racket over something like this or some of my favorite strings by Toraline. Because like I said, I've been wanting something like this forever. Ever since I've been stringing my rackets, I was like, why aren't these strings better? And then finally somebody came along and showed me that it was possible. And when I started playing with them, I'm like, wow, sure enough, pretty much better in all the ways that I hoped it was. So I was extremely stoked. excited. It's pretty much been that way ever since. I don't have any reason to go back to some of those strings. Like, I've basically forgotten about a lot of those strings. They still show up in my rackets sometimes. Like if I'm using a demo, you might see me post a picture of them occasionally because somebody sends me a racket to string and they have a reel of Hyper-G or something that they want to use, but I never buy those for myself anymore. I've been through the rabbit hole of the mainstream strings and all the ones below them, you know? You got your big name brands like Luxilon and Yonex or their Polytour Pro and whatever, and then maybe like Dunlop, Black Widow, et cetera, you know what I mean? The list just goes on. And then there's like Solinco. Below that, there's like Kirschbaum and so on and so on. And I've tried a ton of strings from all those names. They're so lackluster in their performance compared to these. At this point, I've just forgotten about them. Like, I haven't even bothered to put them in my racket in so long because why would I? Why would I? Like, they're not offering me the top qualities that these kinds of strings just meet so much better. So that being said, I think that these strings are just way better. Way better. It's not like having this durability and snapback is some sacrifice of feel or something. It's not. It's just better, you know? Sometimes some things are just better in every way. Like, that's just how things are sometimes. Like this racket right here is just better than anything that came out in the 70s or the 80s, maybe even the 90s. Like, it's just better in every single way. This is the future of strings. So that's where I'm coming from when people ask me about that. Again, I'm not saying that everybody should be thinking about strings the exact way I do. I know some people like gut for reasons that are unique to gut, multi for reasons that are unique to that. It's usually like an arm-friendly thing though, or maybe just power, affordability, etc. So people have their reasons for liking things that might be inherent to a certain technology or a certain material. But for those that like polyester strings, for the things that polyester brings to the table, I think it's extremely hard to argue against my favorites from ReString and Tourmaline. Oh, I guess I'd also say that I'm more likely to use ReString 0 in the mains with sync in the crosses than I am to use sync in a full bed. I like having a shaped main. I like some ball bite. I just don't see a reason to have any of that in the crosses. All right, you guys want to know what my favorite cross strings are? My favorite cross strings, for sure, Wasabi X. Sync is gonna be on that list somewhere. I just don't know exactly where. I need more time, but it's absolutely on the list. Enso Pro. I think I like the gray better than the pink. They also have a yellow coming out, which I have in this racket. I'm getting to know it. So we'll see how I feel about yellow, but gray, one of my favorites. Quite a bit more powerful than Wasabi X, quite a bit more powerful than sync. Oh yeah, and sync may or may not offer a little bit more control than Wasabi X. I need a little bit more time. Tourmaline Snapper might have a place in the crosses as well. That's another one I need more time with, but I don't think I like that in a full bed. It feels like a string that's just so much better as a cross. Like as a main, I felt like it had a low launch angle because it's literally so elastic. The ball just sinks so deeply into the string bed that regardless of the angle my racket is contacting the ball is just always sinking into the string bed like at the same angle regardless. So it would always just come out the same way. Very strange. I don't quite understand the physics of that string, but I'm pretty sure I don't like it in a full bed. I don't think I'll be stringing it in a full bed again, but I really loved it a couple times in the crosses, so we'll see. So I think that Snapper has a place on the list. And of all the strings that I just mentioned as my favorites, or surely to be on my list somewhere, Sync would have the least snapback, but it still has so much more than virtually everybody else. So I just want you to understand, it's at like the bottom of the very top. You know what I mean? Like if you're to take the 0.01% of strings that perform to my satisfaction in terms of snapback, it's at the bottom of that extremely small and short list. So still phenomenal snapback, just a little bit less. And just to reiterate, in this string bed, which I've had for quite some time, this footage that I'll show you in the edit, it's from a while ago. These strings are still snapping back quite well, almost like I have Wasabi X in the crosses or something like that. So this might be 16 gauge 0 in the mains with 17 gauge sync. It's for sure 17 sync, not 18. And it may or may not be 17 or 16 gauge 0. Either way though, if this was my only experience with sync, I would assume that it has as good of snapback as Wasabi X and all the best, etc. So it's that small of a difference, but there is a difference and I wanted to be clear about that. Again, depending on the racket and the gauge that you use, I think that will determine whether or not you even are able to observe the difference. So thank you guys so much for watching washing. Thanks for washing. If you guys are doing your laundry, I appreciate that because it's hygienic. You know, you don't want to be out there on the tennis courts getting infections and so on. So I appreciate that you're washing, but I also appreciate that you're watching, and I appreciate the support. Using my code to get strings from Tourline and ReString is a great way to support the channel and a great way to get a discount. 10% for ReString, 20% for Tourline. Code is Time for Tennis, as it is on pretty much every platform. Now this one's juicy. If you guys want to save 10% on a tennis racket, you can use Direct Tennis to do that. They have pretty much all the rackets out there right now. You can save 10%, that's a lot. And shipping is only $5 per order as long as you get it from the same seller. So if you guys are clever, you can save quite a lot of money. So that's a great way to support the channel as well. Link to do that is below. You use an app on the iOS platform. Android is going to be worked on soon, but if you have Apple, check it out. 10% on a racket. That's like 40, 50 bucks these days, easy. And subscribing, liking, etc. obviously always very nice. And also, last but not least, the coffee shout-outs. I want to give a shout-out to Neil McNair, who gave me my most recent one, and I will do the coffee shout-out now. Today's coffee shout-out is to Neil McNair. Thank you so much for the support. This is what is in my coffee today. I'm making it myself, keeping it super low sugar, but delicious and so healthy. Got mushroom supplement, collagen protein, magnesium citrate, cinnamon. It's good stuff. Look at how frothy that is. Let's just give it a little, yeah. There we go, there we go. So good. Neil, thank you for the support. If anyone else would like to support the channel directly by getting me a coffee, I will shout you guys out in a future video. Thanks again for the support. All right, well, thanks again for watching. And as of today, ReString's sync should be available to purchase. That sold out so quick when they first announced their flash sale of 100 strings. Like, I woke up expecting to do a little bit of promo for ReString or whatever, just like shout out that it's available, and it was gone. That string went so fast. I guess what I'm saying is, get it while you can. And let me know what you think. Give me your honest opinions. Listen, I give you guys my honest opinions, okay? I'm not holding back on any of my opinions. Like, all my praise, all my criticism, like, you are getting the unthrottled opinions here. Stay tuned to see a little bit more about these rackets. I actually think I'm ready to choose a racket. And by choose, I mean I'm kind of sick of being in between rackets, but yeah, that'll be for another video. I'm also gonna talk again about Sinner's mold. This is not Sinner's identical racket, but it is the mold that he uses. And I got this racket pretty darn close to spec to what he uses. Buddy of mine, AC Tennis, actually has one of Sinner's rackets. So we'll talk in a future video somewhere. Might be a short, might be a full-length thing, we'll see. Stay tuned for some content with other YouTube influencer tennis people. And is that everything? I suppose so. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. All right, have a good time out there. Oh, and you can follow my Instagram if you want. Sometimes I post different content there, or the same content if you want to see my shorts or reels twice. I'm pretty responsive to DMs there as well, so it's a good place to chat if you want to chat or have questions, etc. Until then, I will see you next time. Bye for now. Oh yeah, stay tuned for a giveaway. I'll make it happen.